Today's event is part of a week of events called Rethink. We know that at the moment in our society, lots of people are rethinking their lives, they're rethinking society, and we want to be part of that conversation. And we think the Christian faith offers answers to those big questions. So the way that today's lunch is going to work is that we're going to be listening to a talk by Stefan Gustavsson to discuss, I thought God was dead. Why are people talking about God again? And this will be followed by a Q&A, a question and answer using something called Slido. If you haven't used Slido before, it is an online platform where you can ask questions anonymously. Anonymous questions about today's talk or anything that has made you think a bit more. So on the screen appears the QR code. So if you grab your phone, scan the QR code, and that is where you'll be able to put your questions. And no one will know it's you. So put whatever question you want to put down. This is also the code. You can head to slido.com1443805. And we're also going to have a microphone that I'll be running about, coming to you, asking your questions. So don't fret if you are not really technologically minded. So let's introduce Stefan. Would you come and join us, Stefan? Let's give him a round of applause.
Thanks.
So, Stefan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm a Swede from the very south of Sweden called Skåne. Everyone in Sweden could immediately recognize my dialect. It's a kind of thick dialect. I'm married to Ingrid, and we have a number of children and grandchildren. And I'm a accomplished ice cream maker.
That was a mic drop moment. I have to ask, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Strawberry and champagne.
Wow, that's such an unusual combination. I love it. That's wonderful. How do you make ice cream? Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Well, these kind of recipes are secret.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. That we cannot know. Wow. Okay. Well, obviously you are today's speaker. Can you tell us why this question that we're going to look at today is important to you?
Why thinking about God is important? Well, basically because I'm a human being. Since as a human being, you naturally have all those questions. Where do we come from? Why are we here? And is there a kind of ultimate explanation? And then, of course, God always comes into that kind of discussions.
Wonderful. Well, I will leave you to it.
Okay, thank you very much for coming out to this lunch presentation. I thought God was dead. Why are people still talking about, or why are people talking about God again? So, when we are looking into society, we are always looking from a certain perspective. And perspective is really important if we're going to discuss what's going on in our society. And, where you stand decides what you see. And I'm really interested in listening to you. What are you seeing when you look into our culture? What's your opinion on what's going on? I will try to share you some of the things that I see. 2 weeks ago, a new book came out called Taking Religion Seriously, written by Charles Murray. Interesting, taking religion seriously. He is a very well-known academic, and he tells such an interesting story about himself and his wife, Catherine. They came both from an agnostic background. Their whole life been thinking that issues of God are not interesting and cannot be solved. We just live for ourselves. They were happily married. They had just had their first child. They had no need of God. Life was going on really, really well. And they lived out from the perspective that I learned that smart people don't believe that stuff anymore in terms of believing in God. Okay, so that was the situation. Then they had their first daughter, Anna. She was born. And Catherine, the mother, knew, of course, that evolution dictates that women who love their infants are more likely to pass on their genes. So she expected there will be love between my daughter and myself. But it was a love on a totally unexpected level, as she formulated. She loved Anna, her daughter, quote, far more than evolution required. So what on earth is this? This deep connection, this just overwhelming sense of love. And that shaped her life, her worldview, and started her on a journey. Is there a source, a foundation for this love? Now, her husband, Charles, was really stunned by this. But he saw the amazing transformation in her life. But at the same time, he says, I am totally spiritual and religious tone deaf. You know, like a person who can hear music, but don't understand really what's so special with Mozart or Beethoven or spiritual experiences, religions. I'm totally tone deaf. Still, he couldn't just write off his highly intelligent wife, who now was on a very different journey. So he figured out, I need to explore those issues in areas where I'm not tone deaf. And those areas were mathematics and science. Areas where he had some abilities. And he stumbled across a book called Just Sick Numbers by Martin Rees, a non-religious, highly acclaimed astronomer, former president of the Royal Society. And he wrote about the new insight from science about this world. And what particularly struck Charles was what we call the fine-tuning. The just amazing figures that are coming out, how finely tuned, how finely balanced the universe is in order to make it possible for life to be here. And this started to grow on Charles. And he says, for me, the inescapable conclusion is that a God created a universe that would enable life to exist. So he started to open up his life for God from this scientific and mathematical point of view. And he says, taking that step, being open for God, opened all sorts of other possibilities. Now, this is just two persons. But the interesting thing is that during a number of years now, there's been so many public voices saying similar things. So we read about Jordan Peterson, whatever you think about him, wrestling with God. Or Ayaan Hirsi Ali, former part of the Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, New Atheist team, now abandoning atheism and saying, I'm now a Christian. Shortly after, her even more famous husband, Neil Ferguson, atheist background, now describes himself as becoming a lapsed atheist and embracing the Christian faith. Or historian like Tom Holland, why I changed my mind about Christianity. Or philosophers like the founder of Wikipedia, Larry Sanger, approaching Christianity from a strictly philosophical point of view and gradually changing his perspective and now becoming a Christian. Or very different kinds of people, like the comedian Russell Brand, becoming a Christian from a very non-Christian life and lifestyle. Or the rock star Nick Cave. And he says it was Christ, the Christ figure, that attracted him, and he became a Christian. Now, you still can say, well, that's just a lot of anecdotes. Interesting that a lot of mostly middle-aged people are trying to open up their life for something new. Maybe they are experiencing some crisis. What has that with you to do? Well, it is not only happening among that kind of people. So in Britain, there was recently a survey showing that so many more people, also young people, are now coming to church, are looking into the Christian faith, are becoming Christian. And listen, in secular Sweden, the most secularized country in the world, this was the headline on national TV, Jesus can become the influencer of the year 2025. Whoa! That was a shock, I can tell you, for the Swedish population. Young people, it says, are searching for a guiding authority. Now, it's not, Jesus has not been the main influencer during 2025, but there is a shift really going on. Why this shift? Is it possible to understand, and do we know where it will lead? Well, I think the jury is still out on where it will lead. I think we can say something about why it has happened. I will give you 3 reasons why I think our culture now is changing and a lot of people starting to move in another direction. Firstly, well, we thought God was dead. Why? Because of reason. That is the kind of backdrop for this. We thought reason, in a sense, have killed God. Reason showed that there is no God, and we wanted to build a culture where we get rid of superstition, rid of falsehood, we get rid of faith, to lay bare the naked truth. So we cut ourselves as a culture free from God, from revelation, and from any guideline outside our own thinking. So then what is left is the individual reason. And then we started to run with that. Now, finally, we're going to find truth. And what happened? Well, you can just look at the number of recent new words in our culture. Fact resistance, filter bubble, alternative facts, fake news, post-truth. We have not found truth. We are just undermining truth the whole time. This is such an irony. We put reason at the center and we become really unreasonable as a culture. I love this cartoon. Conspiracy Theory Awards. It's all rigged. You know, you can be skeptical towards everything, but if you are just skeptical and criticizing, in the end, everything collapses, including your own reason. You undermine everything and then you have nothing left. And we have not found truth. So the rational West has now become a very irrational civilization. That is an irony. Okay, so the failure in the areas of reason, I think, is one of the reasons why we're now moving in a new direction. Secondly, why we thought God was dead? Science. It's close to reason, but it's separate. We started to think that science is the solution. Science has helped us in so many ways, has solved so many issues. Now science can finally give us all the answers. We don't need God, revelation. We don't need anything outside of science. Too many people have thought like that, put their hope in science. Now, science is very limited. And of course, today, most people realize science cannot answer all questions. Science is more like a thermometer. It's really, really good if you want to know the temperature. Really good. But if you ask other questions, it has no answers. You know, you ask the thermometer, what is human dignity? What is the meaning of life? Is there a God? It cannot answer. It can just tell you your temperature of your body. So science works within a small but very, very important area in describing nature and how nature functions. But we as human beings, we need much more than knowledge about the functions of nature. We ask a lot of other questions, and science cannot help us. Even more, what science today tells us about nature, about this small area, points today in an interesting way towards God. If you want to read about this, I would recommend this book, Return of the God Hypothesis. 3 scientific discoveries that reveal the mind behind the universe. Actually, I would claim that it's much easier today to believe in God than 100 years ago, because of what science are telling us about the world we are part of. In this book, Stephen Meyer goes through 3 areas: Big Bang, fine-tuning, and DNA. Let me say something about the Big Bang theory. You know, 100 or 120 years ago, a lot of philosophers and scientists, they approached Christians and asked, you say that God created the universe. Who then created God? And Christians said, oh, well, who created God? Well, he isn't created. He has never come into being. He is eternal. He is just there. Okay, said the atheist. We hear what you say. We have a much, much simpler solution. We get rid of God, and then we say about the universe exactly what you said about God. It's always been there. It's eternal. It has never come into being. And that is a good answer. Notice no one has the luxury of beginning with nothing. Everyone has to begin with something. And the atheist said, well, let's just begin with an eternal universe. But that is now challenged by the Big Bang theory, who says this universe isn't eternal. It came into being 13 billion years ago. It has a beginning. And that, of course, has brought God back into the picture as a very interesting possible cause of the universe coming into existence. I said something about the fine-tuning and what changed the mind of Charles. We can think about the DNA. That's a more recent finding. The enormous amount of information within a single cell. And information is not matter. And yet DNA carries information. To say that the code of life wrote itself and that meaning can arise without mind, that is very strange. It is like DNA is not only biology, it is biology, but it is kind of theology in disguise. All this amount of information, at least you could make that argument. The existence of the genetic code points, a lot of people would say, beyond chemistry, for codes requires coders. So in a sense, DNA whispers of a logos, of a mind behind matter. Okay, I think that's the second reason that what we have said and thought about science, and that science in a strange twist now is pointing towards God. Thirdly, why we thought God was dead, secularism. Secularism is the idea of indifference or rejection or exclusion of religious and religious consideration. And so a lot of European countries, my country, together with a few others, have taken the lead to say we should be secular people, secular cultures, we would secular nation, meaning we are excluding everything religious. And secularism has been very successful in how it has permeated our society. And you can say it's won the day. My country is very, very secular. But now something interesting happens. Secularism is now more and more being seen as a deconstructing movement. The main emphasis has been on deconstructing our Christian past, the Christian faith, and put it all apart. But now when it's all in ruins, more and more people can see that secularism is not offering a better alternative. It's not an alternative at all. It's just this critique of something, and there's no meaningful answers to why are we here? Who am I? What do I do with my joy, the love you can experience in relationship to a child? Or what do I do with my shame and guilt? Is there hope? How to build a civilization? So it's just empty. And I think a lot of people are starting to see that. And people realize, as Tom Holland has said, Christianity and only Christianity had made possible the making of our world. And what he means by that is the values and beliefs of Christianity has played such a central role for Western civilization and have contributed to the development of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Nothing of that can be based on secularism. And still, it is the kind of foundational values of our culture. So more and more people are feeling that tension. Those values are important, but we have now deconstructed a foundation for them. So what's happening now? So, to summarize, why is belief in God making a comeback? My answer would be because God was declared dead with invalid arguments. He was declared dead with invalid arguments. So, where does this leave us? Well, I like this gentleman. He has said, I have no special talent. I'm only passionately curious. Well, we have to give him that he had some special talent. But I will not focus on that. I like this. I'm passionately curious. That is what I would like to challenge you with. To be passionately curious about what is this life. This Mission Week is an invitation to you to be curious about life's big question. And we will explore a number of different issues this week. And we will, of course, look into the main alternative to the secular story. And that great alternative can be found, amongst other places, in the Gospel of John, which begins like this. In the beginning was the Word, the Logos, and that stands for a mind. In the beginning there was a mind, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. So he is claiming there is a mind behind the cosmos. There is intention and meaning behind this existence, including my existence and your existence. And then even more, he says this mind had entered into this world. The mind became flesh, became human, and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory. Glory as the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. So that the ultimate cause of the universe is a mind, a person, who then later has entered into his own creation in the person of Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus the Christ. That is a highly fascinating alternative in how to understand your existence. Among Greek philosophers and then all through history, thinkers have talked about the true, the good, and the beautiful, what's called the three transcendentals. They are representing the highest value for us as human beings, what we ultimately long for, the true, the good, and the beautiful, what we aspire to as human beings. Now, the picture John gives us about the Logos, the mind behind the universe, fits this very well. There is an ultimate truth, an intelligence behind this existence. In another place, John writes about the Logos being the light. He's not darkness. He is goodness through and through and through. And he even says this mind is love. He's ultimate love. The love Catherine experienced when she received her daughter, a love that is far more than evolution requires, has a home, has a foundation, has a base in this living God who created the world. So this is the invitation to start to explore new alternatives, to look into a very different story, and we will invite you to do that this week. Secularism says that we come from nothing and we end in nothing. The Christian story, to use the word of J.R. Tolkien, says something very different. The Christian story begins and ends with joy. Welcome to explore that story together with us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stefan, for that really thought-provoking talk. And we're now going to move into a time of Q&A, of question and answer. So if you have thoughts and questions that come to mind off the back of what Stefan is saying, then head to Slido. You can submit your questions anonymously, either through the QR code or through typing in the numbers on the website. I'll give you 1 minute now just to kind of maybe chat to the person next to you, see how they found the talk, and if you have any questions that come to mind, and then we'll come back. And if you'd prefer to ask a question to Stefan face-to-face, then I will be around with the mic in the second part of the Q&A. So I'll come back up after about a minute. So yeah, get thinking. We are going to start our time of Q&A. Just to say, on the Slido website, you will see that there's a little thumbs up next to the different questions. If you see a question that you're like, I really want to get that answered, press the thumbs up. It will move the question up in the order, and so it will be more likely to be asked. Okay, so our first question is, I might find the conclusions of secularism uncomfortable, but why is that an argument for God? Shouldn't I just make the most of life?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question, and it's a true reflection. In itself, the kind of collapse or the weakness of secularism is not an argument for God per se. But it is an argument to start to look in other places than in secular. If that has failed, and we still want to have a meaningful perspective on human life, what then are the alternatives? And there are, of course, a number of alternatives. I'm not saying that God, as understood within the Christian faith, is the only alternative, but it is the natural alternative to start with in the Western culture, because you can say globally it's the biggest alternative. For our culture, it's the foundational alternative. So why not start there? And if then Christianity fails, yeah, you can move on and look into other options. But it's absolutely one of the main options.
Great, thank you so much. The next question is, there are many religions. How to know which one is right?
Yeah, so that's close to the previous question. And on the outset, you cannot know which religion is true and which religions are false. You can know that they cannot all be true. That you can know from the start, since they are making contradictory claims that cannot be true at the same time. They could possibly all be false. That's one alternative, and that no religion so far have captured real truth. That is an alternative. But you cannot know until you start to investigate. And then you need to start to investigate things I think, in an orderly way. And I would say it's most naturally to investigate the option that most people in the world have said, we think truth is here, and start there. And then look into the other options later if you find Christianity to be false.
Great, thank you. Next question. Tom Holland is interesting. However, many cultures have developed coherent understandings of the world apart from Christianity. Where does this originate?
So it's a question what you mean by coherent. So a cultural perspective or a philosophical or religious perspective can be coherent within its own presuppositions. But you need also to see what does this coherence imply. So take another big alternative, Hinduism. You can try to formulate that in a coherent way, but then you have to accept the law of karma, which means that we should look at each other in a very different way than we're used to in the Christian West. The law of karma says, if you are happy, successful, rich, healthy, you can thank yourself. That is the fruits of you being such a good person in your previous life. If you are sick, are poor, are struggling, your life is filled with pain, you have to blame yourself. You have caused all this upon yourself, and this is the right situation. You should be in that situation because of what you did in another life. Now you can say, well, you can formulate that as a coherent picture, and then my response would be, yeah, it's coherent, but it's terribly ugly to accuse a person for their situation, for example, for an illness, and say that's because of what you did in a previous life, even though no one of us have seen that previous life. So that will build a society with a lot of inequalities and divisions between people because of their leading principle. Now, the leading principle within Christianity is that everyone is created in the image of God with the same dignity, the same status, and everyone shares the same problem. So you cannot look down on anyone else, since Christianity places us all at the bottom. The technical term here is we are all sinners. On a really basic level, we share the same problem. Now, that will create a very different civilization and culture when you look upon each other with eyes that say we are equal in our dignity and we're equal in our problem. And then in addition, there's a real solution to the whole problem of sin, which you will not find in Hinduism.
Great, thank you. Before I kind of roam about the room and find some questions on the floor, someone has left a comment. They say, I find you talking about Russell Brand as a positive role model pretty disgusting. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I don't know his life that well. I know as much as you can say his previous life before he was a Christian was not a role model, and I think he would agree with that. So there's no need to defend that life. I'm just happy that he has found Christ, and if I've understood it right, he's on a new path compared to his earlier life.
Thank you so much for taking the time to respond to that. Does anybody have any questions on the floor? If that is you, then please put your hand up and I will come over to you. Wonderful.
Just to maybe push back slightly on the question about coherence, I guess just because you don't like the guiding principle of a worldview doesn't necessarily prove it as untrue if it's still, I guess in terms of coherence, like it plays out life how you experience it and live it and feel it. And also kind of, are you not simply judging a non-Western worldview over and against kind of Western inherited Christian principles that you have? So I guess that I'm not necessarily satisfied by that example, and maybe I can push you a little bit further and to say then why Christianity in those cases is not just nicer, but true.
Okay. That was a number of questions. And very, very important. So thank you for raising those questions. First, in terms of the cultural issue, I'm a Westerner, and as a Westerner, I'm a Scandinavian. So, you know, we all come from a certain culture. And that causes a lot of problems in terms of communication. We have to acknowledge that. We are all of us are formed by our specific context. But I don't think that makes communication and understanding really impossible. I think we are one humanity on the same planet. And even if there's a lot of difficulties, linguistic, cultural, historical difficulties, it's possible to bridge. So I can speak to someone from another culture, and he or she can speak to me, and it is possible to understand each other and start to communicate. A lot of hassles along the way, but I don't think we should give up this. That's why we have the United Nations. We think with all the problems that are there, we still can communicate. And I find it fascinating that it's possible for me to read thinkers from ancient Greece. I struggle sometimes, but I still can understand some of what they are saying. I've read some things of Indian thinkers, Hindus and Buddhists, formulating their ideas. And I think I understand at least some of what they are trying to say. So that's my first point. We need to acknowledge our cultural biases, but I still think communication is possible. Secondly, in terms of coherence, that is one criteria for truth. We look into a system of ideas to see is it coherent as a system. But an even more important criteria is to say, this system, how well does it fit the actual reality of human existence? So let's take the issue of the human being. I think that the Christian faith has a coherent picture of what it is to be a human being. You can formulate it in a coherent way, and then you can put it to test in relationship to reality, kind of empirical test. So how does it work to say human beings are created in the image of God and they are fallen and broken into sin? Human beings are wonderful and disgusting at the same time. Now I think that's such an interesting perspective of human beings, because that is how I experience people around me, and that is part of how I experience myself. I can see qualities within human beings that I admire and that gives me joy, and I see this horrible darkness of selfishness and brokenness. Now, I think that is such a more reality-anchored view on the human being than to say, like in much Eastern philosophy, that human beings are at the heart divine. We are kind of sleeping divine being, and through meditation we can awake or come in contact with the divine within us, and so on. So, well, my point here is you can take a system and put it to test in reality. Or to take another example, ultimately in the pantheistic systems, they say there's no ultimate difference between right and wrong. Now, I find that a horrible perspective, since my experience of reality is that there are few things I know so sure than that there is real evil and real goodness. So even if a system is coherent, if that system denies the ultimate reality of goodness and of evil, I don't think it fits with the factual reality. And I think the third question, sorry it was a long answer, but three really important questions. So why ultimately do we think Christianity is true? I would say you can look at that from different perspectives, which gives affirmative answers. So I think you can ask the question, is there a God? And explore that issue. And then ultimately you have to come down to the person of Jesus, the Word that became flesh. Do we have any good arguments to say the historical person of Jesus is the full representation or a true representation of the Creator God? And that ultimately will be confirmed or denied in terms of his resurrection. If he was crucified, dead, and remained dead, you can dismiss Christianity and go on and explore Islam or Buddhism or whatever. But if there are good arguments for God raising Jesus from the dead, you have a definitive proof of the truth of Christianity, since it is all centered on the incarnation, God coming into the world, and God then raising Jesus from the dead.
Sadly, that is all the time we have for questions. But I'm sure that Stefan will be very happy to chat more with you.
Absolutely.
If you have any more questions. And also feel free to chat to the Christian Union members here. They would absolutely love to talk to you more about this. So this brings us to the end of the lunchtime event. Feel free to grab seconds after we finish. There's plenty more food. But I'd love to draw your attention to this resource. It says Uncover Luke on the front. Where are George and Esther? So if you'd like to grab a copy of Uncover Luke, head to George and Esther. This is one of the ancient biographies of Jesus' life that we can trust. It's historically reliable. It's written by a medical doctor, in fact, called Luke. They're free. And so this is one of the best ways that you can engage and ask questions and investigate Jesus for yourself. So feel free to head over to Esther. He will give you a copy. But the fun doesn't stop here. Tonight, we'll be back in here at the same I think about 7:30. It's going to say the same time then, at 7:30. And we're going to be exploring, what can Jesus offer me that no one else can? There'll be a free meal, some live music, and an interview as well with a surgeon and lecturer called Piyush Shirani, and a talk from Michael Otts as well. So we would absolutely love to see you this evening. That's all for now. Enjoy the leftovers and free food.